we're gonna have Ron and our television person, David Evans. But before we do that, we have something special to share with you. Jarvis, I'll stop share. And we have, wow, DeJoire Hall, who's going to do a special performance. And I hope you surprise the person in the room that we really wanted to touch. Here we go.
Dear God, dear stars, dear trees, dear sky, dear people, dear everything, dear God. God is inside me and everyone else that was or ever will be. I came into this world with God, and when I finally looked inside, I found it just as close as my breath is to me, rising like the sun is the hope that sets us free. Your heartbeat make my heart beat when we share love, like a blade of corn, like a honey bee, like a waterfall, all a part of me, like the color purple. Where do it come from? Now my eyes are open. Look what God has done. It takes a grain of love to make the mighty tree. Even the smallest voice can make a harmony, like a drop of water. Keep the river high. There are miracles for you and I, like a blade of corn, like a honey bee, like a waterfall, all a part of me, like the color purple. Where do it come from? Now my eyes are open. Look what God has done. I don't think us feel old at all. I think this is the youngest us ever felt.
Thank you, Desiree. Thanks for your time. If anybody didn't know, that was the song from The Color Purple, which Ron was an investor in, as opposed to a producer. And this is a great segue into starting the Hearts and Minds segment with Ron Simons. Let me just go share the screen for a sec, just to show everybody who he is. He won the Tony Awards for Porgy and Best in 2012, Bonnie and Sonia and Masher and Spike in 2013, A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder in 2014, and Jitney in 2017. And he's an investor in The Color Purple. So Ron, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And yeah, it's let's just go right to the heart and right to the mind, because this is. So if there's any business right now, Ron, and one that people are just so upset about not having the opportunity to continue, is going to Broadway, which has been a cultural touchstone since the, I don't know, last century, 2 centuries ago, sorry. And it's so much in terms of how we are shaped as Americans. And you've been doing that in your entire career. So what's going on right now?
Well, there are actually surprisingly a large number of Zoom calls that are going on. I'm on Zoom calls 5, 6, 7 times a day. And what we're doing is we're doing the groundwork to prep for our return. So I've got 3 Broadway shows that are in development. One is a revival for Color Girls, which we're moving from the public to Broadway. An amazing new play called Thoughts of a Colored Man that could not possibly be more pertinent than it is right now. And Blue, it's a play with music that Felicia Rashad is going to be directing, with music by Nona Hendrix. It's just going to be a very special piece, which we plan to open at the Apollo Theater uptown. But
by the way, sorry, I just got to brag. There was just a New York Times piece written about all those projects that are in development.
If you haven't seen it and you care about Black Broadway, I would encourage you. I don't know if I have it here. Maybe I do. You
know what, Jarvis, why don't you put it in the chat?
Okay, perfect.
You focus on illuminating and enlightening us.
So we are basically doing the things that one must needs do as a producer to get ready for the show, which is to say we've got to cast it. We've got to make sure we have all of our elements for marketing, advertising, promotion, and press in place. We're planning what might the messaging be when we come back from Broadway. And while people are guessing when we might return, no one really knows. We hope that we will be open in March to return in some fashion, but we, as not surprisingly with organizations and companies, and I'm sure David too, with his companies, like how are you going to bring a cast together with the crew in a healthy way and making sure that they are safe with consistent and constant testing of actors, and how do we make sure that the people in the audience are safe? Does that mean we're going to have every other row? Are we going to have 2 seats between each person? It's unclear at this point, but we all have medical experts working on this process and progress to understand what is it going to look like and feel like to be in a Broadway theater when we reopen. The presumption is that there won't be a vaccine, but if it is a vaccine, then that is a major game changer, and not just for Broadway shows, but touring shows, because I have a show called Ain't Too Proud that was shut down on Broadway, and we were supposed to be on our tour, national tour, this year. Needless to say, that got pushed because many states are just shutting down and going back to their initial phases of reopening. But I'm very optimistic, and the reason why I'm optimistic is because theater has been around for eons. The Great Flu didn't kill it. So many natural disasters didn't kill it. It somehow survived. And I think that there will always be a place in our society for live performances because they are unique and they do not replicate, they cannot be replicated on screen. And while we, with Ain't Too Proud, had a beautiful rendition of a song with all the cast and all the members of the band playing, it's not the same experience about sitting in a room, being a part of that. Because when you're in the theater as an audience member, there is a call and response between you and who's on stage, and they feed one another, and that could make a show go through the roof. It could make a show stand still, or just limp along, depending on what the energy is.
Well, Ron, I actually there was an interesting New York Times article that basically talked about how theaters in New York actually stayed open during the 1918 flu. And, I mean, not to laugh, but one of the reasons is that, you know, people got really, really sick for the Spanish flu. So they knew that they had it and they stayed home. But there were, city planners who really made an effort to continue with this. So what do you think maybe is the difference now since then, since you're saying that?
Well, I'm not an expert in the 1918 flu, but I do know that now in New York, there is a anticipation, a hunger for theater, because people come to New York not to sit in their apartments all day. They come to New York to participate in the cultural, bonus of what it is to be in New York. And that includes, of course, Broadway.
Right.
We expect that when we reopen, most of the attendees will be folks from the area, the tri-state region, who have been sitting at home watching just Netflix and going about their lives, sometimes in a mundane way. And now those people will be ready, willing, and able to go out. Because I think that New Yorkers are resilient, and I think that they're also going to be among some of the fearless to say, I'll go to the theater with a mask, maybe some gloves, and I'll sit around with 600 people I don't know and sanitize and do whatever I need to do, because the hunger for theater is just that strong. And it's amazing. Like, now, Broadway has been a theater owner's market for quite some time. There are always more shows than there are theaters to show the shows. So that's one difference than what was happening in 1918. This business of Broadway has never been stronger. Will it return to the $2 billion industry that it was? I like to think so, but it's not going to start off that way, to be clear. I think it's going to have to build to it, and it's going to be a lot of experimentation. Shows are going to open, and if people come, they'll stay open, and if they don't, they'll close. So the proof is actually going to be in the pudding. And I would say that for the fall of this year, there are some shows that are going on tour in October. So we are watching that quite closely over at Ain't Too Proud, because if no one's coming out in October, that will give us a flag that maybe January for moving.
So you're gonna test it.
We don't have to test it. We're just going to observe.
Huh? Because it's interesting. I mean, that's a good parallel to what the movie business is doing with Tenet. I mean, there could be an opportunity to do an international tour as well.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I'm also curious about, because I always like to compare, adjacent industries. I've been in New York City for the last 6 weeks. I just came to the Hudson Valley, as I said. And before that, I was quarantining my brothers for 3 months in Connecticut for 2 months. And so I go back 6 weeks ago, and that's when I bumped into you, and I begged you to be on this, and you've been so kind. Yeah. And you introduced me to Jarvis too, who is fantastic. So thank you. We all were excited because the week after, the restaurants were going to open, right? And they're all outside, and it was like the prohibition, or like they were like kind of selling drinks behind a table that was blocking the door. Then they opened, and there was this excitement. And then literally last week, I just saw everybody so drained. Not only do they have to do it in like 100-degree weather, it's so hard, it's expensive. And for example, I saw a stat that 85% of restaurants in the country could go out of business if they don't get more stimulus. So is there a conversation about that in Broadway? I mean, it seems like, there's so much work that you're doing to prepare all this. Is there like a plan B? Like you started, is there like kind of a sequential stage of opening?
Well, what I'm really excited about is the advances that I understand are coming in the technology like Zoom, because as we know, Zoom was not created for live performances.
Desiree, you were amazing, but clearly.
Desiree, however, because I would have been even more probably weeping, because that was one of my favorite songs in the show. But
Mine too.
yeah. So for me, it's going to be challenging, but I'm hoping that we will be able to pivot and provide content, perhaps not live, but on the internet. And it's already happening. I mean, I've had readings of plays, one with Joe Morton cutting up. You know, there are more plays that are being read, some of which are being done for fundraisers for not-for-profits who are in really, really dire straits. I'm really, really worried about regional and local theaters because their bread and butter, they really, for the most part, were not making millions of dollars anyway. So I'm really concerned about them, and particularly about cultural institutions from and about and for people of color, right? Because
Let's
we,
drill down on that. So, you know, the article that you were in has been talking about Black theater, right? And now there's a reconstitution in the terms of, you know, how we think about providing more of a platform for Black theater now that, you know, Floyd's death happened and Black Lives Matters. There are two other things that I learned from my friends in theaters. Number one, there always has been like, you know, we have one role for the Black woman, right? And this has been something that's been, you know, I mean, all actors are typecasted, but this has also illuminated and put a spotlight on that problem. So what can you say about that?
yeah, I've been in this business now for almost 10 years, and what I'm looking forward to is change in the Broadway community. But when I came in, being ignorant, I had to, pay my dues because before you can change the system, you have to learn the system. So I spent the last 10 years trying to understand how processes work. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room with 35, 40 people, which would include producers and marketing team and the ad team and the press team and the PR team and the social media team. And I'm the only person of color in the room. That's starting to change because when I came on board, there was a couple who did producers and me, only two Black producers on Broadway. And now we're moving to change that. And now we have 6 Black producers on Broadway. And I'm mentoring 5 Black women to be Broadway producers, which would almost double the number once they step up and become producers. So they are working on some of my projects. So they have their own projects as well. But honestly, for me, the big issue is going to be monitoring and keeping people's feet to the fire. In other words, I want to hear a report this year about what diversity looks like in Broadway companies. And then I'd like to hear next year what the diversity is for Broadway companies. Because once this window closes, and I suspect that the anti-racism window is moving, and at some point there's going to be something else that's going to take over the headlines. When that happens, it's very easy to fall back to everyone's already done their press releases, they've set up their initiatives, they spoke out about racism. Now it's about policing ourselves to see, are we actually making progress? And mentoring is a huge area that's of concern for me. I want more people who have the ability to intern or to provide mentoring to people of color to do so, because the pipeline is not full. There are not a lot of Black producers who are working their way to the stage on Broadway, and that's got to change. And it's the only way we're going to change is by inviting them in.
Yeah, you gotta hire, as Cindy Gallup said on her show, you gotta hire, welcome, and promote Black people. So, Ron, because we don't have time, you were generous to say that you would stay on for Zeitguide culture class after hours. If that's still, could you still do that?
I can absolutely do that.
Cool. So people hold their questions, but I have one more question for you.
I have one more answer before you ask that question.
Okay.
And that is, I don't know if anyone is, I'm certainly pivoting, right? So while
That's the question I was going to ask. Are you more creative right now?
Of course, I'm writing a one-man show that I'm going to be delivering on, because I'm an actor as well. On the internet, I'm developing projects like a movie that I'm writing, which of course will be probably still read on the internet. And I've even gone into the health business. Like I've become a distributor for Shackley products. So if you need supplements and you need really, really good skincare products, I'm going to put something in the chat so you can come out and do it. So instead of buying on CBS, why don't you buy from a Black producer who is making things neat? Help a brother out.
Yeah, all right. Ron Simons. All right, well, we are going to stay on afterwards, and people. Yeah.
Last thing, I just have to say, the reason why I love David, though David has never met me, is because I am a Trekkie from the olden days, and he brought Picard to CBS All Access. It made my entire season. So thank you, David.
You're very welcome. That's good to hear.
All right. Well, this is a great entry.
I like an old school fan who embraces the new version. So God bless you.
I'm there.